G'day folks, Mark here again. I've got another one of my tips or thoughts on long range shooting, everything from your moderate long range shooting and your fast PRS style or tactical style of things out to the ELR stuff that we do all the time. And this one, as I'm showing here in the thumbnail, accuracy versus consistency when it comes to measuring your cant, when it comes to a cant measuring system. So that's the angle of your rifle straight up and down. And I've got videos on explaining how that affects things, but it is very important for accuracy to have your rifle dead straight or to have the rifle straight up and down. It changes the trajectory. It either changes how you're aiming, which then affects how what your point of impact is, or it can also change the trajectory of the bullet because of the way it actually comes out of the barrel. So those are the things that we need to have good control and good the ability to read and fire with the rifle canted the way we want it to be. So the systems of doing it, there's from the way that it doesn't work very well at all, and that's by using your reticle and thinking you've got it straight. It sort of works with some things if you've got straight things to line it up and down with, but the moment you take buildings and bits and pieces out of the road or enough attention out of the road, go to the finer details, then you'll find that just visually measuring your cant with your reticle isn't enough. System I tend to use a lot, I've got one on a little track scope here, is a bubble level, a decent sort of bubble level, which I tend to use, and that's what I definitely favor. I use them a lot. I've even gone down to where I've made my own larger bubble level that I ran on my big ULR rifle type thing. So this is nice and easy, very accurate sort of bubble level. And there's ceramic balls. I've used a little tiny bit, which do a similar thing. The bubble level tend to work better. And now you've got all this electronic stuff coming in. I think it's the send it gauge. They're just easier to read. You've actually got to look at a bubble level properly and assess it properly where it is, whereas a green light is a green light. So there is some speed in that. And then there's the likes of things, the SIG scope, and there's a few scopes coming out now where they actually have that same light system is internal in the scope. So probably the best way to do that ultimately for being able to see it with paying no more attention to what's in front of you is the likes of a heads-up display, but basically it's in your reticle, so in your scope, so you can actually see it there. But this is about accuracy or consistency. What I'm talking about there is that yes, it's always better to have your rifle dead straight when you're shooting. So it's always straight up and down, so when you're shooting, so it'll always be the same. But there's times when that doesn't need to be, or more to the point, that isn't the most important thing. So to start off with, where it is the most important thing is for your cold bore shot and for fast acquisition when you shoot around and the PRS sort of stuff. If you're shooting it certainly affects more at distance, but it is also about levels of accuracy. But certainly once you get out to the 400, 500, 600, 1,000, 1,200 yards or 1,200 meters, that sort of stuff, all those same sort of measurements, then yes, it does matter a lot that you've got it straight. And if you're getting onto the target rapidly and quickly, then all those ways of measuring cant will do, but the easier it is and the more accurate it is, the better it'll be. So especially when you're shooting not so much for a platform, you're shooting just off a rest, you're shooting off a bag, you're shooting that sort of stuff, and you can manipulate your rifle a lot, then having something in whatever form is easiest for you to measure properly and keeping that as straight as possible, as uncanted or straight up and down as possible, will make for better shooting. And yes, it does matter that much. You will find shots missing by up to a foot with only a few degrees out at the likes of 800 and 1100 and 1200 sort of yards or meters. You'll find that much difference in your shot. So it does matter that straight up and down. And it gets dramatically bigger the further out you go. So in all cases, a good working cant system is very important, or cant measuring system is important. But here's the thing, for particularly the sort of shooting that we do, or when you are platform shooting, so you're shooting off a bipod, you're shooting when you can actually set your rifle to a set position, and you're going to have multiple shots of that thing, or even 100 yards, and you're just grouping. It's less relevant at 100 yards, but it is relevant at 100 yards. So you just want to group, whatever distance you want to group at. Then, in actual fact, that's a point where accuracy of measuring cant is not as important as consistency of your cant. So what I'm actually saying there is that if you are constantly checking your canting and getting it right before you pull the trigger, is not as good as simply having your rifle locked up. Having it so the cant has to be the same. Having a bipod system that can mean that the rifle does not move shot to shot. You can do what you're going to do and it's locked up. My bipod system is very good at that side of things. The way the two shells will wrap around the whole barrel means that there's with any tension, and I'll sometimes run a little bit more tension on them, I'll take a spanner out and tighten a little bit so I can lock it up. But any bipod system, the moment that it's pivoting from underneath, then it tends to take a lot of force to lock them up, but it depends on all those different systems. But what I'm actually saying is fixed. If it's fixed and it's shot after shot after shot, so it's a group, or in a situation where you're trying to, like me with ELR, where I'm trying to get onto target, the wind's working, I don't want anything else moving, then even if I've got my cant a little bit out for that first shot, even if I've made that mistake and my first shot is a little bit out, as long as it stays there, the bullet's going to stay doing the same things. It's going to stay going to the same position. So even in some cases, to not confuse things too much, but sometimes when you're out of windage elevation, you can actually lean your rifle over to actually counteract, do a little bit of windage in actually canting your rifle. Not something I'd suggest to do without enough experience to understand how to do that, but it is something that can be done. You can actually cant and use the cant to fight wind. But when you do that sort of thing, what the main thing that I'm talking about is that the rifle doesn't move shot to shot. So quite different than rapid acquisition and trying to pick up and shoot to this. You don't want to, although I suppose if it stays fixed, you're on a turntable and you can do that. Realistically, if you're moving around, you're always resetting. You're always going to be adjusting your cant and dealing with the different positions you're shooting from. So then accuracy of measuring a camp is more important. But the moment you're shooting a group at that same thing, then the moment you move your cant, then you're going to have to refine your impact point. So once you've fired at that, you want to go again. As long as it stays exactly the same, it becomes more important. So the consistency of cant becomes more important. So I hope that makes some sense. I'll recap quickly. Fast acquisition stuff, moving on, first shot hits, consistency of using your data, all that sort of stuff to make it work so you understand your reading wind, all that type of thing properly. Then the straighter up and down your rifle is, and the better your system is at measuring that, and you are at measuring that, then the more accuracy you'll find out of it. Once you have taken that shot and you plan on taking more shots, so when the likes of getting on ELR particularly, or group shooting particularly, then what matters is once you're on paper and you want to move across, consistency of cant is more important. Even if it's a little bit off, if it stays that little bit off, exactly that same amount out, even to a moderate amount, even 2 or 3 degrees out, if it stays exactly that place, you shoot the whole lot exactly at that 2.3 degrees or 3 degrees or whatever it is, then you'll find your group will be the same. Once again, I come back to it's always better if it's straight, but consistency matters more in a group or in finding yourself on the target, trying to walk yourself on the target. You want consistency, rapid acquisition, first shots, all that sort of stuff, then accuracy. So yeah, I think that makes sense. I won't go again about both the same in various forms, or you want it as accurate as possible, but I hope that makes some sense. There is all these systems. Like I said, I think it'll end up with, in the long term, for tactical and for high level scopes, having a little green dot come in the middle there to tell you canted in a heads-up display or in a light inside your reticle, yeah, I think is where it goes. Ideally, you'll also be able to see what you've actually dialed in, or whatever it is, all the other bits and pieces that come as technology goes into scopes. But as I said, for us, it come right back to where it works very well for me to have this sort of thing here, where it's just a good, accurate bubble level. And I tend to also say on a bubble level in that conversation, the larger they are, generally the more accurate they are, the easier the bubble moves, the more accurately it lays in the center, that side of things. The smaller they are, which we use some of those as well, you tend to take a little bit more time to settle, and they're a little bit harder to read really accurately. But as I said, I'm more about consistency for the ELR stuff we do and the sort of group shooting that we do. The fast acquisition PRS, yeah, then the likes of the Send It and the likes of the little light which comes on there nice and fast on there probably does have some advantages. Anyway guys, hope that makes some sense. Thank you very much for checking in. I'll catch you next time.